Procrastination is one of the most misunderstood human behaviors, and misunderstanding it costs people years. Most people have been taught to treat procrastination as a flaw, a discipline issue, a motivation problem, a spiritual shortcoming. So when procrastination shows up, they don't get curious, they get judgmental. They say things like, why can't I just do this? What's wrong with me? I should be past this by now. Does this sound like you or somebody that you know? But here's the truth, we need to anchor early. Procrastination is actually not laziness, it's self protection. And until you understand what your system is protecting you from, you will keep fighting the wrong battle. Hi, if you're new to me, my name is Raquel, and I'm your GPS for success. Let's get started. Breakthrough. In the first episode of the season, we talked about why time slows down, how resistance, internal drag, and constant renegotiation stretches timelines even when effort is present. In the second episode, we talked about why goals aren't reached, not because people are lazy, but because stress and pressure, it distorts how the brain functions. And today, we're going to look at what sits right between those two ideas. So here's a statement that often creates resistance when people hear it, but it's essential. You always do what you really want to do. And that doesn't mean you consciously want to avoid your goals. It means that at a deeper level, your brain is prioritizing safety over progress, or what it considers safety. And what it considers is the story that you're telling yourself. That is the boundary of safety for your brain. And neuroscience is very clear on this. The brain does not avoid effort, it avoids emotional friction. So if effort were the issue, you wouldn't be able to work hard in other areas of your life, right? So if discipline were the issue, you wouldn't show up when there's external structure. But most people who procrastinate, they're not lazy. They're capable, responsible, and often over functioning in areas that feel familiar or externally reinforced. What they avoid are tasks that carry emotional cost. That emotional cost, it could look like this: fear of failing, fear of being seen, fear of disappointing somebody, fear of confirming an old belief about yourself, fear of succeeding and having life change. When a task, when that threatens identity, belonging, or self trust, the brain applies the brakes, not to sabotage you, to protect you. Scripture actually gives us language for this long before neuroscience did. The Bible speaks about the heart as the center of direction. Guard your heart, for it determines the course of your life. The heart biblically is not just an emotion, it's the place of trust, belief, and perceived safety. If the heart does not feel safe moving forward, the body doesn't want to follow, even if the mind agrees. This is why people can want to change and still stall. They're not resisting the goal, they're protecting the self. And here's where procrastination becomes costly. When protection is misinterpreted as failure, shame enters the system. And what does shame do? Shame increases threat. Threat increases resistance. Resistance then stretches time. So procrastination doesn't just delay action, it actually compounds the delay. So you hesitate. You judge yourself for hesitating. Your nervous system feels less safe. And then what happens? Resistance increases. And this is how days turn into months and months turn into years. Not because nothing is happening, but because the system is stuck in protection mode. Another hidden cost of procrastination is vagueness. When I'm recording this is January 2026 and people have made their goals, but abstract goals, they don't execute. Does this sound like you or somebody that you know? I need to be more consistent. So then you use consistency as the word of the year. I need to move forward. So then you use the word maybe action as the word of the year. I need to get started. Those aren't actions, they're concepts. And concepts feel unsafe to the brain because they have no edges, no boundary, no completion point, no predictable award. So the brain delays, not because it can't do the work, but because it doesn't know what doing actually means. This connects directly to what we established earlier in the season. Negotiation costs time. When decisions keep getting reopened, the system never settles. Scripture calls this double mindedness, not as an accusation, but as a description of instability. Split desire, it creates that drag. Drag stretches time. And here's what I want you to hear before we move forward. If you've been procrastinating, it does not mean something is wrong with you. It means something feels emotionally expensive, right? It's your perception around that. And emotional expense requires understanding before correction. When shame dissolves, clarity emerges. And clarity is what makes movement possible again. This is what your system is protecting you from. So before we talk about how to move forward, we need to stay with the understanding a little longer because understanding it, that's the one first place that things are stolen from you. Acceleration doesn't begin when you push harder. It begins when you understand what your system is protecting you from. In the earlier episodes, we talked about internal drag and how stress distorts time. And today, we're zooming in on how that drag shows up as procrastination. And here's the key truth most people miss: your system is never random, it is always responding to perceived costs. When you procrastinate, your brain is not saying, I don't want to do this. It's asking, what might this cost me? And a lot of times, what is this going to cost me emotionally, right? It's checking in like, how is this going to make me feel about myself? And that cost could be very quiet. It can sound like, what if I try and it doesn't work? What if I succeed and I can't sustain it? What if this changes how people see me? What if this confirms something I'm afraid is true? The brain doesn't need certainty to apply the brakes, it needs only possibility. And when there's an emotional risk and it's present, delay becomes protection. Scripture gives us insight into this through the idea of guarding the heart. We're told to guard the heart, right? Because out of it are the boundaries, the issues of life. It doesn't mean walling yourself off, it means being attentive to what feels unsafe. Because what feels unsafe internally will never move smoothly externally. Can it move? Yes, but there's always a cost to pay. And this is why Jesus never shamed people into movement. He invited them. He would say, like, follow me, come and see. Do you want to be made well? Invitation creates safety, pressure creates resistance. Another hidden cost of procrastination is that it keeps people reopening decisions. They decide to move forward, doubt shows up, then fear, then fatigue, and then they renegotiate. And every renegotiation drains energy. Every reopened decision is signals instability, right? The double mindedness. And that instability stretches time. And by the way, if you're finding yourself in doubt, audit what you're looking at because doubt comes to the eyes and fear, it comes to the ear gate. This is what I meant earlier in the season when I said negotiation costs time. A settled decision frees energy. An unsettled one, it leaks it. And this is why people often feel exhausted even when they haven't done much. They're not tired from action. They're tired from the internal debate. And debate feels protective, yes, and productive, yes, but it's not movement. Scripture describes this as being double minded, not sinful, not broken, split. And a split system cannot accelerate. Here's something important to name: procrastination often increases after progress, not before it. People think procrastination means you don't care, but often it shows up because you care. The closer you get to change, the more emotionally expensive the next step becomes. So the system hesitates. This is why people start strong, then stall. Not because momentum disappeared, but because there was an emotional cost that increased. And this is also why starting over is one of the most damaging myths around progress. When people fall off a day or for a week, they might assume that they failed. So they reset completely. They wait for motivation to return. They wait for the right time. But scripture doesn't tell us to restart, it tells us to return. Return to alignment, return to truth, return to the next right step. Nothing has gone wrong. Delay does not erase progress, shame does. Here's the reframe that dissolves procrastination's power. You're not avoiding action, you're avoiding emotional cost. An emotional cost is not something to push through blindly, it's something to understand, name, and reduce. This is why clarity is so powerful. When the brain understands what's happening, threat decreases. And when that threat starts to decrease, resistance softens. And when resistance softens, movement becomes possible again. So before we go to the break, I want to anchor this clearly. If you've been procrastinating, you are not lazy, you are not broken, you are not behind. Your system has been protecting you. And now we're teaching it how to move safely. And after the break, we'll move into application. We'll talk about how to reduce emotional costs, how to shrink actions so the system feels safe, how completion creates momentum, how to move forward without forcing yourself. Because once threat is removed, progress doesn't need pressure. It actually becomes natural. So I'll see you on the other side.
Thank you for watching Prospera TV Network. We hope you're enjoying the show. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
Pause for a moment. Not to do anything. Not to fix anything. Just pause. You don't need to catch up. You don't need to prove momentum. You don't need to justify why something hasn't moved yet. Right here, this moment is not behind. Take a breath that drops your shoulders, another that softens your jaw. Let your body hear that it is safe to stop bracing. Because what most people call procrastination is not avoidance, it's protection. Your brain isn't resisting effort, it's avoiding emotional friction. It's saying, I don't want to feel pressure. I don't want to feel disappointment. I don't want to reopen the place where trying didn't feel safe. So it waits, it delays, it distracts, not because you're lazy, but because somewhere along the way, effort got paired with pain and the brain learned, let's not go there. But here's what's important to notice. You always do what you truly want to do, even when it doesn't look like it. If rest feels safer than progress, rest wins. If certainty feels safer than expansion, certainty wins. If staying small feels safer than risking hope, small wins. That's not failure. That's intelligence trying to keep you intact. Now notice this. The moment you release shame, clarity doesn't need to be chased, it emerges. Because shame compresses the nervous system and clarity only flows in safety. You were never meant to force yourself forward. You were designed to move when aligned, which means the question is no longer, why won't I do the thing? The question becomes, what would make it feel safe to begin? Sometimes that answer is smaller than you expect. One breath, one sentence, one gentle action with no expectation attached. Not finish, not commit, just touch it. Because the brain doesn't need motivation, it needs permission. Permission to move without punishment. Permission to try without being measured. Permission to exist without being evaluated. And when that permission is granted, something interesting happens. Energy returns. Not the frantic kind, the honest kind, the kind that feels like, oh, I can do this. Not all of it, just this. Right now, let your body register this truth. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not failing at discipline. You are responding to what you learned would keep you safe. And safety can be updated gently, patiently, without force. Let your nervous system feel what it's like to be met instead of managed. Because forward motion doesn't come from pressure, it comes from trust. And trust begins here, in this pause, where nothing is demanded and nothing is wrong. Stay with that for a moment. Let the music carry what words don't need to finish.
Welcome back. Now that we've reframed procrastination correctly, we can finally talk about movement without pressure, without shame, and without forcing yourself to override your system. Because once you understand that procrastination is protection, the goal is no longer to stop procrastinating. The goal becomes reduce the emotional cost of the action. When emotional cost drops, movement becomes natural. So here's what most people miss. And actually, something came to mind that I did want to answer. Why am I talking about the emotional cost? Is because feelings is the language of the subconscious. And so that is the undercurrent. How you're feeling about it is the language of the subconscious. Emotion is just the language of the conscious. Something comes into your conscious awareness. So people tend to interchange those two words, but they're actually different parts of the brain happening, which is why I keep on talking about the emotional cost. That was for somebody, but it's worth mentioning. So, going back to what most people miss, they try to motivate themselves into action, and you can through the sheer act of your will, but it's not sustainable. Motivation doesn't remove threat, it just a lot of times increases it. So, when you tell yourself, I just need to push through, how many of us have heard that? You just need, or heard that said to you, you just need to push through. What is your nervous system hearing? Something dangerous is coming. So what happens? It resists harder. Can you push through? Yes, but it doesn't feel good. And oftentimes the fruit isn't good either. Or you might get the fruit, but it's short lived. And this is why forcing yourself rarely works again long term. It might create a burst of action, yes, but it doesn't create momentum. Momentum requires safety. And we're looking for is momentum because that gives you the compound effect. So let's make this practical. The first step in reducing emotional cost is that you want to narrow the frame. Large goals feel emotionally expensive because they're undefined. They're carrying too many unknowns, right? I need to finish this. I need to get consistent. I need to make progress. Those statements don't tell your brain what to do. They tell your brain that there's a lot at stake. So what happens? Your system, it stalls. So instead, when you start to narrow the frame, as you do that, the action then feels non-threatening, not impressive, not perfect. You're looking for something to do that's executable. And this is why scripture quietly aligns with neuroscience again. We're told not to worry about tomorrow because tomorrow carries its own concerns. This is not spiritual avoidance or avoidance at all. It's actually nervous system wisdom. When you collapse a task into today, threat decreases. And when you collapse it into the now, your safety increases. So acceleration doesn't require big steps, it requires clear ones. So the second step is removing identity pressure. Many people procrastinate not because the task is hard, but because it feels defining. If I do this and it fails, what does that say about me? If I finish this, what's going to happen next? If I succeed, can I sustain it? Identity pressure makes action feel dangerous. So the system protects you, right? Keeping you in the belief system by what? Delaying you. Why? To reduce that pressure. So then you end up separating who you are from what you're doing. This is why this step is really important and it's deeply biblical. Scripture repeatedly reminds us that identity is given, it is not earned. You act from identity, you're not acting to secure it. So when action stops feeling like a verdict on your worth, what happens to your resistance? It softens. The third step is creating completion. Completion is one of the fastest ways to signal safety to the brain. When you complete something, even something small, your system learns I can finish. I'm not in danger. I can move without collapse. Completion builds trust, not hype, not motivation, trust. This is why partial progress often feels worse than no progress because there's an open loop and that creates tension. Closed loops restore calm. This is why restarting matters more than perfection. Most people don't stall because they stop. They stall because they stopped after interruption. Life happens, energy dips, emotions spike, and that's normal. What matters is how quickly you return. Return tells the system we're safe enough to continue. Perfection tells the system one mistake means danger. And scripture models return constantly, not restart, return. Nothing has gone wrong. Here's what begins to happen when emotional cost is reduced. You stop bracing yourself. You stop negotiating every step that you're taking. You stop waiting for the right moment. Your action becomes quieter, and quiet action actually is fast. And this is how time compresses, not through intensity, through clarity. So if you take one thing from this segment, let it be this: you don't need more discipline, you need less emotional friction. When friction is removed, progress doesn't need force, it flows. Now, as we begin to close up this episode, we're going to talk about how to support this process consistently, especially when life interrupts, motivation fades, or pressure returns, because that's just life, right? Because understanding, it removes shame, but support, that sustains movement. By now, something important should feel different, not because you've been told to do more, but because you understand yourself better. When shame dissolves, clarity emerges. And when clarity emerges, movement becomes possible again. But here's the truth we need to name before we close. Understanding alone does not sustain momentum. Support does. Support, what it does is starts to root in the truth so that you can continue and sustain momentum. Most people don't stall because they lack insight. They stall because life interrupts, right? Your energy will fluctuate, emotions spike, schedules change, pressure sneaks back in. And without support, even the clearest understanding can fade under stress. This is why consistency has nothing to do with willpower. It has everything to do with how quickly you recover. Recovery is the real skill. Some call it resilience, not pushing, not perfection, recovery. Scripture gives us language for this too. We're told that the righteous may fall, but they rise again. That's not a moral statement, it's a system statement. The difference isn't falling, it's returning. When you return quickly, momentum stays intact. And when you stay stopped, what happens to time? It stretches. This is why support matters. The brain learns through repetition and safety. It doesn't need pressure to change, it needs consistent cues that movement is safe. That's what creates new patterns. That's what restores trust. And that's what allows acceleration to become normal instead of exhausting. And this is why I created Task Animal, not as some tool for your productivity, not a motivational hack, but as a support system for execution that works with your nervous system instead of against it. Task Animal is designed to help you clarify what actually matters for the day, shrink actions so they feel safe and doable, reduce emotional friction before it becomes procrastination, recover quickly when life interrupts, build momentum without pressure or self attack. It doesn't tell you to push harder, it helps you to move smarter. Think of it as a daily companion for follow through, one that understands how humans actually work, one that helps you stop renegotiating your decisions, one that brings you back into clarity when your system feels overloaded, one that keeps momentum alive without demanding perfection. Because acceleration doesn't come from intensity, it comes from consistency without fear. And here's something important to hear before we close. You don't need to become someone new to move forward. You don't need to fix yourself. You don't need to force discipline. You don't need to overcome procrastination. You need support that reduces emotional costs and restores safety. When safety is restored, action follows naturally. And if this episode helped you see procrastination differently, if it lifted shame and gave you language for what you've been experiencing, then Task Animal is there to help you turn that understanding into steady movement. It's simple, it's accessible, and it's designed to grow with you as this season unfolds. You can learn more about it at yourgpsforsuccess.net. And if you want to connect with me directly, you can find me on Instagram or LinkedIn. Remember this: procrastination isn't the problem, pressure is. And when pressure dissolves, progress returns. And that's how timelines begin to collapse and you move into divine acceleration. Until next time, may God's richest and best be yours. Bye for now.
Breakthrough.
This is your Prospera era, where dreams align with grace, abundance flows like rivers. You've stepped into your place. Rise, reign, and remember, you were born to shine. Welcome to your moment, Prospera, it's time.
We hope you enjoyed today's show on Prospera TV Network. Make it a point to visit us on YouTube and catch all your favorite shows anytime you want. Interested in hosting a show of your own? Or advertising your business on our network? Contact Elena Rodriguez.